Steve, this is a wheel stander. In the 1960s, cars like the original Hearst Hemi under glass driven by Bob Riggle were doing wheel stands up and down drag strips all over the country. But it was strictly for exhibition. The jet cars showed up in the 1970s and 1980s, and they too were stars of the exhibition circuit. Now it's the 1990s, and it's a whole new ball game for the jet cars. It's actually eliminations for the jets, something they have not seen in the 40 years of previous racetrack activity. Steve?
Okay, Bob, enough talk. Let's go racing with two perfect examples of the contemporary jet funny car. You're looking at Dick Rosberg right there. Nice thing about the jet cars, you have no problem clearing the starting line area. Everybody heads to the grandstands as quickly as they can. No one wants to stand behind these machines that throw a fire trail almost 50 feet long.
You talk about the contemporary jet cars, Steve. You've been involved with the sport for quite some time, and you saw these cars in the earliest forms. They were really rather radically designed entities at that time.
And they were just lumbering beasts. You still had to put your fingers in your ears, but they did not put on what you're about to see. Dick Rosberg out of Rockingham, North Carolina. He's part of a two-car team. We'll see his partner a little later on. Mario CARRANCA from Port Charlotte, Florida, and they're about to do the fire dance, or fire show, really, as they call it. And that is maybe the most important part of jet car racing in some ways.
It's kind of like the burnout in the funny cars of the dragsters at the regular NHRA Winston drag racing events. This is Bob VANSCIVER's main event warrior. Dick Rosberg drives it. We'll see VANSCIVER with his own car a little bit later on. These really are pretty radically different, Steve. The car in the far lane, Mario CARRANCA's car, is about 1,000 pounds heavier than the main event warrior. It's an older car in design. It's got two big fuel tanks over on one side, and it really does carry a lot of weight. These cars normally match race during the course of the season, but here it's regular eliminations, and this time that extra weight really could hurt Mario.
And the fire show is actually choreographed. They talk about it kind of like professional wrestling, and it's that little toggle switch so they can control it. But that show is over. Now it's time to compete, and this is serious competition now. Rosberg, the quicker of the qualifiers. In fact, he was #1 qualifier. The machine in the near lane, and as Bob said, the machine over in the far lane, maybe a bit of an underdog, might be looking for a hole shot, and he got one.
Now that's about all he's going to get right here as Rosberg takes the Warrior down the racetrack and gets the win. Excellent run, 574, 264 miles per hour. To put that in perspective, these cars running at about 560s would be a colossal run.
And that man was pleased with what he saw on the Rosberg appearance, Bob VANSCIVER. He owns both of these cars, the one he's in and the machine that Rosberg just won with here in the first round.
VANSCIVER calls his car Runnin' Scared, and I asked him one time why the name. I figured there was some little cute idea that he came up with, and he said, because I'm actually terrified when I get into these race cars. And I think that's probably one of the wisest things one of these drivers have ever said. Let's go to the end of the racetrack and get Aaron Green.
The #1 qualifier advances with a great 574.
That's pretty good. We figured about a 73, 74 because the air got a little better, or a little worse today. But as the day goes on, we should step up a little bit.
As our next pair get ready to stage, listen to the burner pops. Wow. That's what they call them, right, Bob? Burner pops.
They're just throwing that raw fuel through there and igniting it. Bob VANSCIVER out of Atco, New Jersey, runs the racetrack up in the Garden State. And Lou SATTLEMAIER, long-time involvement in the sport of drag racing, used to run one of those old A gas cars back at Indy, back as early as the mid-1960s.
Both drivers hard on the four-wheel brakes. Remember, there's thrust all the time when these things are lit. They've really got to wrench down on those brakes. They're the big tailpipe on the VANSCIVER car. Great start. Oh, a classic, gorgeous jet car race, and it is VANSCIVER winning it on a hole shot, just like in nitro funny car racing. A 617 at 266 defeats a quicker 616 at 256.
Just like eliminations is a word you don't usually associate with jet cars, hole shot is not a word that is usually associated with these vehicles either. Great matchup right here. These two cars, weight-wise, power-wise, very evenly matched, and look at that, 100th of a second. Unlike the Gainesville Gator Nationals, a lot of you may associate with this track where they open up the whole place, everybody here at the Parts Plus Super Chevy Show sitting on this one side of the racetrack. This is a dynamite matchup. It's Rich Hanna and Roger Gustin.
It's been a long time, 14 months since I drove, but I don't know, once you get in this thing, you get right back in the groove, and it's just like it always was.
Roger's car actually took flight, and he was very seriously injured, and that has resulted in the Gustin brothers creating some revolutionary new safety ideas for these race cars. Rich Hanna, the son of Al Hanna, who arguably is the fastest and quickest jet car pilot in the sport right now.
The HANNA family, very technically oriented. In fact, Rich's older brother is a jet engineer. Look at the smoke out of the GUSTIN cars. He staged it. That's the first time we've seen that here at Gainesville. But, as you predicted, Bob Fry, it is Rich HANNA at a 577. Look at the speed. 275 miles per hour. GUSTIN slowing safely to a 603.
This is the under pressure machine. It's actually a Chrysler-bodied machine. This is Pat Davidson. He'll be driving against the work mat entry, Jerry Gannon, driving for Team Roger GUSTIN. One young kid on the starting line, Pat Davidson. At the end of the racetrack, another new generation racer, Rich HANNA.
Great 577 run, Rich. You advanced to round 2.
Thanks. You know, Roger's always a tough guy to get by, and we just want to take it one run at a time. The air's really tricky today. It's getting hotter, but as the day goes on, we'll try to step it up a little bit, and I think we'll be able to run faster a little later.
We know there's quite a rivalry between you and ROSBERG, and both the number 1 and number 2 qualifiers have advanced.
Yeah, he ran good, and we ran good, but like I said, he's on the opposite side of the ladder, and we just want to get by the next round, and then we'll worry about taking the funds if we happen to make it there.
See you in round 2.
Already flicking their bigs back at the starting line. Our next pair, we'll see them in just a moment. Now let's go back down to Aaron Green with Roger GUSTIN.
Feel any butterflies first time getting back into actual competition?
Not a one. I mean, it was just like I've been doing it forever, Aaron. I guess if you drive race cars for 35 years, you get used to it.
Roger GUSTIN, a true champion.
One thing Roger never gets used to is going out early in the program. He will now watch as his teammate, Jerry Gannon, takes the other work mat entry up against Pat Davidson. Pat won the big all-jet show up in Cincinnati earlier this season, one of the real rising stars in this category. He'd love to punch out a couple of the big names here at Gainesville.
A good start between Davidson and Gannon. Davidson takes over at half track and daylights him with a 593. At, again, a very nice speed, 263 miles an hour. Gannon in the GUSTIN car slows to a 625 at 271, so that sets up our final 4. It will be Pat Davidson versus Rich HANNA. HANNA has the lane choice. And it will be, on the flip side, Dick ROSBERG versus Bob VANSCIVER. ROSBERG will have the lane choice. Not that it really matters with jet funny cars, but it's traditional in drag racing.
Get in, sit down, shut up, hold on. That's either a sign in Bob VANSCIVER's jet car or what Sister Mary used to tell me back in Catholic school. Steve?
One of the neat things about drag racing is that the fans all have access to the pits. And there's a mob headed over there right now to get a close-up look at those jet cars. Right now, you take a close-up look at some
Mile of mud. A jet funny car team has a much lower fuel bill. They don't burn nitromethane. This is just good old kerosene. Same kind of stuff you'd find in the wing tanks of a commercial jet.
Probably even a lot less expensive than stuff that Warren and Kurt Johnson may run. That stuff's even cheaper than gasoline. And speaking of Warren and Kurt, this is a team effort right here. It's Bob VANSCIVER and Dick ROSBERG. They're running scared against the main event warrior. And if you think anybody's going in the tank here, you better think again. VANSCIVER's very competitive, but he would love to see his fast car, that's the one that ROSBERG's driving, get a shot at the HANNA family in the final 2. This car ran 570s in the opener, Steve, and if he does that all day, he's going to be very tough.
And a lot of attention has been paid to the aerodynamics of these bodies, especially since the high-speed Roger GUSTIN crash we talked about earlier on. They're in. Oh, it's a beautiful start. ROSBERG in the far lane. It is ROSBERG, not a big surprise, 574. His speed down a little bit from round 1 at only 261 miles an hour as the parachutes blossom and they stop safely on this very long drag strip.
How about the world's fastest bracket car? ROSBERG is now going 574 twice. As we get set for the next pair, Rich HANNA, as he is thinking on what lies ahead at the far end of the racetrack. Speaking of which, here's Aaron.
Another big win for Dick ROSBERG, a 574 for the second round in a row.
Thank you. We're doing real good. I think now we're going to go in the final. We're going to try to beat whoever we're going to race. I would have to think it might be Al HANNA, but we're going to give him a run for his money. The main event warrior is running perfect today.
And very consistent, too.
Yeah, I think it is. If the weather cools down a little more, it should run in the 60s the next run, and we'll be just fine.
Old habits die hard. The Al that Dick ROSBERG was referring to is Al HANNA, who owns the car his son Rich is driving. And, you know, I don't think it's a given, Bob Fry, that Pat Davidson is out of this thing. Rich HANNA may have his hands full here. The afterburner appears to be a little leaner than maybe it was earlier in the day.
Look at the great shot, the aerodynamics on that Pontiac that Al HANNA has built and turned over to his son right now. Talked about old habits, Steve. How about the old habits? As long as there have been jet cars, there have been fire shows like that.
Absolutely, and as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot more safety considerations on these cars, and part of that is due to the Pro Jet Association founded by Roger Gustin. But when you start hitting speeds of 275 miles an hour, you better pay attention. And if you watch closely, you'll see them actually slide into the beams. The tires aren't turning.
These are not wheel-driven machines, Steve, as you know. These are thrust-powered entries. They have tiny tires on the front, slicks on the back, but not the size you would normally think in a 260-mile-per-hour race car. So you are right there, just sliding them up to the starting line and the staging beams. A whole new process here, actually trying to get reaction times and get a good start for these jet cars.
It's a red light by Pat Davidson. He's going to leg it through anyway, and he does cross the finish line first, but disqualified for anticipating the light. Rich Hanna, 575 at 275. Let's see if we can see it, Bob.
Watch this. Betty fouls again. Yep, there he is. Tried to take a little bit of a shot on the starting line. Knew that he was down a couple of tenths to the Hanna car, and he gave it a shot and came up empty. Rich Hanna, Dick Rosberg. What a surprise. The finals in the Jet Car Championships here on the Challenge of Fire. Like father, like son. Here's Al's kid, Rich.
Davidson was gunning for you, Rich. He gambled on the tree and red lighted.
Yeah, I think he had to do it. I would have done the same thing. But Pat's always capable of stepping up his car, and we were worried about him, and now we're in the final, and we can worry about that.
Well, it'll be the number 1 and 2 qualifiers in the final, and you're within 100th of Rosberg. You ran 575.
Well, that's good. That's what we expected. You know, the air is going to be a little bit better, and we can tweak it a little more. The cars are so equal, it's just going to be a driver's race. I'll do what I can.
Should be a great final round, Bob.
Might not be Force and Etchels or Johnson and the Dodgers, but it will be Hanna and Rosberg, and that should be fun.
You should talk to some of those round-and-round racers. Maybe we can invent a jet class that turns left. Right now, we're anticipating a tremendous final round here at the Challenge of Fire between Rich Hanna and Dick Rosberg. Sometimes I wonder if the fire show isn't more than just for the fans. Maybe they use these afterburners to intimidate each other. We'll find out if it worked here in just a moment. But first, you know, Bob, there are so many facets to one of these events, you really want to bring your walking shoes.
You really do, Steve, and maybe a chamois, because between the rounds of the Challenge of Fire, the fans here at the Parts Plus Super Chevy Show have a lot to see. The BF Goodrich Car Show is a popular program, especially in the Southeast, where the classic cars are in mint condition. Hundreds of owners come to compete in various categories like model, year grouping, or conversion classes. Now, the Pro Modifieds are real crowd pleasers, too, in the pits or on the track. These are 200-mile-per-hour missiles with nitrous-injected engines that rip the quarter mile in under 7 seconds. These events prove very popular as bracket racing programs as well. Hundreds of regional racers compete on the track at the Parts Plus Super Chevy shows in Super Pro, Pro ET, and the street tire classes. The competition is fierce and the turnout tremendous at every event.
Well, there's no one exploring the pits right now. They are all in the grandstands and on their feet for the final here, the Challenge of Fire. A 20-something Rich Hanna against a 50-something Dick Rosberg.
I'm telling him you said that. You called him an old man. Nobody wants to stage, and it is going to be the old man in first.
Oh, yeah, but look at the kid in the far lane. It is Rich Hanna, one of the best side-by-side jet funny car races I have ever seen. A 568 to a 571, 278 miles an hour for the winner, Rich Hanna.
That's what makes this new format of jet car racing so exciting. They are dead even out of the starting box. And Steve, you talked about them using that fire show at the starting line to intimidate each other. Watch the car in the near lane. No flames. I'm telling you, Dick Rosberg flat ran out of fuel at the finish line, and it cost him the race.
I think you're right, and the happiest people down there are Rich's parents, Al and Ellen Hanna. Off will come the helmet, and our Aaron Green will get a word with the champion here in Gainesville today, Rich Hanna.
I can't believe it. I'm so happy. It was a crazy battle up there. Let me tell you.
Well, an outstanding run, a 568 at 278, and you win your first ever race.
Oh, thank you very much. We tuned up a little bit. Dick's a great driver. We had a great staging battle up there. We both lit the first light. Neither of us wanted to go in. Finally, he went in, and I went in. I cut a pretty good light, I think. I did my job, and I saw the win light after I went through the finish line. I'm ecstatic.
Well, your mom and dad are sure proud of you, Rich.
Yeah, we're happy. You know, Dick's been quicker than us all weekend. Did we outrun him?
Sure did. 568 beat his 571.
Great. I mean, we out-tuned him, and God, for ADAP and Auto Palace and Pontiac, we can't be any happier. My brother Scott, I wish he was here. He's in France, but he'll be back soon.
A bit of an upset for sure in the final round as the number 2 qualifier upsets the number 1 qualifier.
Put some of his adrenaline in the tank, and it might run 400 miles an hour. Well, that's it from here in Gainesville. Let's go down to Gary and Army. What do you think, guys?